It's the Real News Network. I'm Sharmini Pires coming to you from Baltimore. The UK is now the worst performing advanced economy in the world. This is according to the Independent magazine. This announcement that growth has slumped and just 0.2% in the first 3 months of the year comes less than a week before the UK general election. Joining us today to discuss the UK economy as it relates to the British general election is Kam Sandhu. Kam is an investigative journalist and editor and a co-founder of the UK-based independent media outlet, Real Media. Kam, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me back. It's good to see you.
So, Kam, the article in The Independent seems to suggest that the UK was doing well before the Brexit. How do you respond to the latest economic figures that it reveals?
Well, I think there's probably a little bit of myth busting that we need to do about the growth that was happening beforehand, because this is something that the Conservative Party have, relied on, saying, we've had really, really great growth. Which is true, but it really depends on how that growth is shared out. Danny Dorling gave an example. So let's say me and 3 of my friends, we earned £1 a week, and then we grew to £2 a week. That's a 100% increase. However, if I take 80% of that extra money and the remaining 20% is divided between my other 3 friends or colleagues or residents, and that doesn't mean that that growth is being felt by these people. Now, during austerity, we've seen a transfer of wealth going up to the 1%. And so it means that when we see this growth, it's not actually being experienced by British people who are struggling with rising living costs, struggling with stagnant wages, which is a really big problem in the UK, and also a kind of destruction, really, of worker rights through a massive take-up of the zero-hour contracts, of zero-hour contracts, which are able to circumvent holiday pay, maternity leave.
Just explain the zero-hour contracts to people before you continue.
Okay. Well, zero-hour contracts are when, for example, if I worked, they were originally kind of used for, inconsistent work. So let's say that you work in a pub and you're free some weekends and you're not others. So you might have a 10-hour job one week and a 5-hour job the next week, and that might be totally okay with you. However, in the last few years, we've seen a huge take-up of that kind of contract, and it's being used in retail and other sectors where it's never been used before. And it outstripped even the kind of estimates that the government had. I think in 2014, they estimated about 250,000 zero-hour contracts. The true figure was over 500,000. So it's really, outblown what even the government thought was happening. It now stands at almost 1 million people on these contracts. Now, when the Conservative government say that they are getting lots more people into work, that's true, but they aren't getting the hours that they need to live off that income, and they're not getting paid the kinds of wages as a result of, a stagnant kind of minimum wage and pressures on wages that remain after kind of 7 years. I mean, the Financial Times reported in March that the UK was the only country to experience that growth and yet have maintained such low wages. So it is a political choice, and I think that's something that people really need to get their head around.
And when it comes to the government record, what are the officially stated targets regarding both deficit and debt in the country in terms of these figures we are referencing?
Well, I'm sure this is not something that the Conservative Party would like to talk about at the moment, despite the fact that Amber Rudd said that people should really judge them on their record. They have failed at meeting any of their targets that they set themselves. One famous one set by George Osborne when he was Chancellor was that he would halve the deficit by 2015. That hasn't happened. And yet, at the same time, our debt has doubled in 7 years of a Conservative government. That's doubled in the time that it took Labour 13 years to create the same amount of debt. And at the same time, we've had all this austerity, right? We've had 1 million people now needing food banks. We've got 3.5 million children living in poverty. So what is there to show for this kind of these austerity measures that are taking place? The truth is, not a lot, but the Conservative government is running off this kind of ages-old thing that they are fiscally responsible, and they're people believe that they need to kind of take these measures to take these cutbacks to get within living within our means, which is kind of rhetoric that the Conservative Party have used. But what they've actually done is completely strangle any kind of investment that should have been taking place during times of crisis, and even stopped putting money into things that would have created even better income. So really, the Conservative Party have failed kind of on many, many counts of what is meant to be their strongest subject, the economy.
Right. And Kam, during a recent election debate in which Home Secretary Amber Rudd stood in for Prime Minister because she refuses to debate, and she refuses to debate Jeremy Corbyn in particular. Anyhow, Amber Rudd stated that there is no magic money tree to solve the food bank crisis. Following that, a music video has gone viral on social media reacting to the comment. Let's play it a little bit just so people get a sense of it.
You know, I love it when the Tories say, where are you going to find the money? Like they don't know. Hey, you got it all, you greedy bastards. You know exactly where it is. Then they go on about, where's this magic money tree? It's in the Cayman Islands, the Bahamas, the British Virgin Islands, Panama, Panama-fucking-ma. That's where the magic money tree. And yeah, the Tories have all the money, and everyone knows it. You know, your community centre, shut down. Your library, shut down. Your fire station, shut down. Your police station, shut down. Tory vulture capitalists, property speculators, get the key, the magic money tree. And it's shut down. The Tories' magic money tree is called the public. You...
Kam, you probably in the UK and others there are very familiar with the food bank crisis, but we here on this side of the pond isn't. But so tell us a little bit about what the food bank is, what the crisis is, and what you think of Rudd's comment she made in the debate.
Well, yeah, I mean, the food bank crisis that we've had here has happened completely under the Conservative rule since they came in 2010. I think at that time we had about 40,000 people needing food banks. Now, food banks are places that supply you with free food. This is canned stuff that they will aim to get you through 3 days worth. This is like dry food, soups. We're talking beans. We're talking, canned preservatives. And these are for people who aren't able to access food in any other way. That was 40,000 people in 2010. We now have about 1 million people needing food banks regularly. The main reason that people have given for needing a food bank is cuts to welfare or delays in welfare. And this has come as a result of kind of massive changes under Ian Duncan-Smith, who was working pension secretary, and he's blamed for a lot of the changes that have come in that have essentially destroyed people's ability to kind of get by on benefits. Now, the Conservative government said that they were going to be harsh on benefits because they wanted to make work pay, and that people should go out and look for work. And they kind of really run off that moral idea that people who contribute to society are the only ones who are really, really deserving. Now, that's had negative effects on welfare claimants and disabled people who are facing increases amounts in abuse, verbal abuse and physical abuse, because of this rhetoric of scroungers or layabouts or whatever kind of colloquial term you want to use. However, 90% of people who claim benefits are in work. And we have record levels now as a result of things like the 0-hour contracts of in-work poverty. So these are people who are in work who, as I said, are unable to afford getting by. And these are the same people that the Conservative Party used to say we've created jobs, and yet they're the same ones who continue to struggle and have to battle the kind of rhetoric that the Conservative Party have been at the helm of spreading.
So first it was taking food from the kids at school, now from the food banks. Give us a sense of how all of this is tallying in terms of the latest polls and the upcoming election.
Well, yeah, just to note that I didn't comment on Amber Rudd's comments about the money tree. But this kind of, I guess, will play into how the Conservatives are being viewed at the moment. When Amber Rudd was at that debate and she said you need to judge us on our record. There was laughs from the audience because I'm guessing that many of them are aware that they have failed on all these targets. And this idea that there is, we need a magic money tree to be able to invest in things like the public health service, to invest and get people out of food banks when only 6 or 7 years ago, these people didn't need these places. At the same time, Amber Rudd is involved in 2 offshore firms in Panama, which, you might have picked up. That was the reason that the artist taxi driver in that video was singing about these things. There are so many people, politicians and people in the Conservative Party and people who donate to the Conservative Party who seem to not have their money tree in these tax havens challenged. And so I think the hypocrisy of what's being said, the justification of why we need to carry on being harsher on the British public and not these tax avoiding companies, I think is starting to annoy people, really. So what we've seen recently is I've just seen a kind of a poll come in just before I came on here, and it seems that actually support for Jeremy Corbyn is now higher than it is for the current government. And Theresa May, as a result of her fact that she's been hiding, I mean, this is incredible scenes that we're seeing. Like the Prime Minister who called an election 6 weeks ago because she was going to be strong and stable is hiding from all debate. She pulled out of a radio interview with BBC Radio 4 yesterday. There are reports that she said that she wasn't going to take part in any of the local BBC radio stations, of which there are 40, while she's going around on this campaign. She's showing real cowardice in presenting people with what she's going to do with one of the biggest kind of most important times that we have, which is deciding what's happening during these Brexit deals. And it seems that the arguments that they are using aren't working on people anymore. So, considering that when we started this election campaign, there was 20 points between the Conservatives and the Labour Party, and now we're seeing those come ever closer. I think the closest we've seen is about 3 points between them, and that happened after that debate where Amber Rudd showed up instead of Theresa May, and that's how that debate will be remembered. So I think if Theresa May is going to be able to turn anything around, she needs to show up. And otherwise, I'm afraid I don't think that they're going to be able to recover from this pretty disastrous, it's looking now, campaign.
Kam, we look forward to speaking with you next week, the day after the election, next Friday. Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm looking forward to speaking to you again then.
And thank you for joining us here on the Real News Network.